My sister slid a store-bought snacks pack across the white tablecloth toward my 7-year-old daughter with a smile that wasn't actually smiling. "We didn't order for her," Melissa said, her voice bright as broken glass. "Your mom mentioned she's gluten-free, so we figured store-bought was safer." Around us, her 3 children were cutting into prime ribeye steaks that cost more than my daughter's weekly groceries. Their plates overflowed with lobster tails and truffle sides. My daughter stared at the plastic-wrapped crackers and cheese like she was trying to understand a language no one had taught her. I looked at my mother across the table. She studied her wine glass like it held answers. My father was suddenly very interested in his phone. And in that silence, something in me didn't just break, it transformed. I set down my fork, met my sister's eyes, and said quietly, "Understood." One simple word that would eventually cost them everything they'd built on top of me. My name is Miranda Torres, and I've spent 34 years being the daughter people didn't have to worry about. I was the one who kept the peace. I was the one who worked through childhood trauma by working, by achieving, by never asking for anything. My younger sister Melissa was the creative one, the bright one, the one who needed protection and encouragement and endless chances to start over. My parents, Richard and Susan, ran a successful medical practice together in San Diego. They were busy, important people who'd built a life that looked perfect from the outside. That perfection required infrastructure, though. It required someone who didn't complain, didn't demand, didn't make problems. That someone was me. I'm a graphic designer working freelance now, which means I have flexibility to raise my daughter, Sophia, on my own. Her father was never involved, a choice I made deliberately when I realized he wanted a partner who'd disappear into his shadow. So it's been me and Sophia, building our own small, quiet, stable life in Albuquerque. Sophia is 7 years old, observant in the way children are when they've learned early to read rooms. She's seen her grandmother once a year. Her grandfather maybe twice. They send presents on her birthday. Expensive, impersonal things that arrive late and are forgotten quickly. But they rarely call. They rarely ask about her. She was the grandchild they didn't have to worry about, just like I was the daughter. Melissa, on the other hand, had 3 children from 2 different marriages and a life that required constant financial rescue. I'd covered her apartment deposit, paid her car insurance, helped her move 4 times in as many years. I'd babysat through late nights while she pursued certifications she never finished. I'd sent money without being asked when I knew she was struggling. It felt like love. It felt like family. It felt normal because it was all I'd ever known. My parents approved of this arrangement, though they never explicitly said so. They just smiled when I mentioned helping Melissa. They sighed sympathetically when I explained I was working extra hours to make ends meet. They never offered to help me, not once. But they'd funded Melissa's kitchen renovation last year. They'd bought her kids' school uniforms. They'd made it clear through 1,000 small actions that Melissa's comfort mattered more than my peace. When my parents invited me to their 40th wedding anniversary dinner, I'd actually felt hopeful. Maybe this would be the moment things shifted. Maybe celebrating their marriage meant celebrating family as a whole, including me. I'd even arranged for a designer I knew to create a custom invitation, had it printed on quality cardstock. I'd offered to reserve the restaurant, an upscale steakhouse in San Diego called Elevation, and coordinate everything so they could just show up and enjoy. That would be lovely, my mother had said, her tone suggesting it was the bare minimum I could do. The night of the dinner, I drove Sophia from the airport through the familiar streets of San Diego. We'd taken a red-eye flight because I couldn't afford to miss work for an extra day. Sophia had fallen asleep against the car window, her small face relaxed in a way it rarely was. I watched her sleep and made a promise, not for the first time, that I'd protect her from people who could hurt her. From people like my family. I'd chosen a navy dress for the occasion, something professional and modest. I'd curled Sophia's hair carefully, put her in a dress with a Peter Pan collar that made her look like a little person instead of a child. We looked put together, composed, ready to be dismissed politely. Melissa arrived first with her family, and they spread across the private dining room like they owned the space. Her children were loud, indulged, confident in the way children are when they've never been told no. The reservation was under my name. The room was arranged per my specifications. The menu had been selected based on my input. But the moment Melissa walked in, it became hers somehow. She commanded the attention. She got the hugs. She was the one my mother kissed on the mouth, holding her face like she was made of something precious. I got a distracted wave. My father stood when Melissa arrived, genuinely smiled. When I came in, he was already scrolling through his phone again. We ordered drinks. My mother got wine. My father got scotch. Melissa got a martini she complained about immediately because the olives were too salty. My daughter asked for water. I asked for the same. When the waiter came to take orders, I leaned over to Sophia. "You can get anything you want, baby," I whispered. She studied the menu carefully. She was a careful child, always thinking about consequences, and pointed at the grilled salmon with vegetables. "That one looks good," she said softly. I was just about to wave the waiter over when Melissa reached across the table and slid a pack of store-bought crackers and cheese toward Sophia. "We didn't order for her," Melissa said brightly, that smile that wasn't smiling. "Your mom mentioned she's gluten-free, so we figured store-bought was safer. Our kids have nut allergies too, but we just ordered them a steak." The contradiction sat there, obvious and unspoken. Have you subscribed to this channel? Subscribe for daily stories. Hit the notification bell for more stories that keeps you on the edge of your seat. My father chuckled. The sound of it was worse than her words. "You should have let us know to prepare something," he said. Like my daughter's dietary needs were an inconvenience, an afterthought, something I should have managed better. Around us, the private dining room seemed to hold its breath. Melissa's children were already ordering the most expensive items on the menu. A 10-year-old boy ordered a $110 Wagyu steak and lobster tail. His sister ordered prime rib with truffle mashed potatoes. The youngest got filet mignon with a $28 side of asparagus. My mother nodded approvingly at each selection. Sophia stared at the package of crackers like it was a puzzle she couldn't solve. I looked at my mother. Really looked. She was examining her wine glass with sudden intensity, the way people do when they don't want to make eye contact. My father had returned to his phone. My father was acting like nothing had happened. Something shifted in me then. Not anger, which is loud and messy. Something colder, clearer. Recognition. I set down my fork with deliberate care. The sound cut through the room. All four adults turned toward me. Sophia was still staring at the crackers. "Understood," I said quietly. Melissa blinked. I said understood. I reached over and removed the snacks pack from the table. I opened my purse, pulled out my wallet, and placed my credit card on the edge of the table. "I'd like to order my daughter the salmon she wanted. And I'm going to need you to put all of our meals on a separate check." "Miranda," my mother started, her voice placating. "No," I said. "I'm done with no. Sophia is 7 years old. She is your granddaughter. And tonight, you made it very clear that she's not worth the same consideration as your other grandchildren." Melissa's face flushed. "That's not fair. We didn't know. You knew exactly what you were doing." I cut in quietly. "The question is why?" My father finally looked up from his phone. "You're making this into something it's not. Am I?" I turned to him. "Because it looks to me like I've spent 34 years making myself smaller, more convenient, less demanding. And it looks like my daughter is learning to do the same. And I'm done teaching her that lesson." The waiter appeared in the doorway, sensing the shift in energy. I caught his eye. "I'd like to order," I said, smiling at him with genuine warmth because he had nothing to do with this. "The grilled salmon for my daughter, medium rare for me, and we'll need a separate check." The waiter nodded and disappeared quickly. What followed was the longest dinner of my life. Melissa's children ate their expensive steaks. My mother made small talk that no one engaged with. My father scrolled his phone. And Sophia sat quietly beside me, her small hand occasionally reaching over to hold mine. When the check came, the waiter, bless him, handed it to me first instead of to my father. Mine was $87. My parents' and Melissa's family's tab was $1,200. I paid my portion in full, placed the credit card back in my wallet, and stood. I'm going to say goodbye now, I said. Sophia, go get your coat, please. My mother's hand shot out, gripping my wrist. Don't do this, Miranda. Don't leave angry. I looked at her hand on my arm, then at her face. I'm not angry, I said. I'm finally awake. Sophia found her coat. We walked through the restaurant together, her small hand in mine. The soft lighting and gentle jazz music seemed obscene suddenly, a backdrop to casual cruelty dressed up as a family dinner. Outside, the San Diego night was warm and forgiving. We sat on a bench near the restaurant entrance while I called an Uber. Mom, Sophia said softly, why did Grandma not order me food? I pulled her close. Because some people measure love by how much they're willing to spend. And your grandmother decided you weren't worth spending on. Are we not going to see them anymore? No, baby, I said. We're not. In the car on the way back to the hotel, my phone started buzzing. Text messages from my mother. A voicemail from my father. An email from Melissa claiming I'd embarrassed her in front of the restaurant staff. I didn't respond to any of it. The next morning, I called my lawyer, David Reeves, a contact I'd kept for years after my situation with Sophia's father. I need to know what protections I have against family harassment, I said. David was calm, competent, unsurprised. What kind of harassment? I explained the dinner. I explained the years of financial disparity. I explained that I was concerned about my daughter's relationship with family members who didn't value her. I explained that I wanted to document everything and establish clear boundaries. Do you think they might try for custody or visitation rights? David asked. I don't know, I admitted. But I've learned that people will protect their image more fiercely than they protect relationships. And my family's image requires me to stay small and quiet. Then don't, David said simply. Document everything. Back up all messages. Keep a record of any contact. And if they try anything, we'll be ready. I spent the next week doing exactly that. I printed out every message from my parents over the past decade. I organized them chronologically. I noted the pattern, urgent requests for help interspersed with complete silence. I created a file labeled Family Documentation and stored it securely in the cloud. Then I waited. My mother called 4 days later. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Miranda, please. Your father is very upset. We didn't mean to hurt your feelings. Melissa feels terrible. Can we please just move past this? I listened to it once and deleted it. My father emailed, you're being dramatic. Family doesn't hold grudges. Call your mother. I didn't respond. Then came the knock on my apartment door in Albuquerque. My parents, standing on my porch without warning, without calling first. My mother had red-rimmed eyes. My father had his lawyer on speed dial, apparently, because he launched into a speech about grandparent visitation rights the moment I opened the door. I'm not discussing this without my lawyer present, I said, and closed the door. 20 minutes later, David called. They're threatening to file for visitation rights in California. Let them. Arizona law won't back them, and it'll cost them money to try. What if they hurt Sophia in the process? I asked. Then we document that too, David said. And we build a case. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. From the Child Protective Services office in New Mexico. An anonymous report had been filed claiming that Sophia was being neglected, that she wasn't being fed properly, that she was being kept from her grandparents maliciously. I wasn't even angry. I was actually impressed by how transparent the threat was. CPS called the next day. The investigator, a woman named Patricia with kind eyes, explained that they'd received a report and needed to conduct a home visit. I let her come that afternoon. She asked me questions. She looked around my small, clean apartment. She smiled at Sophia's artwork on the walls, at her books organized on shelves, at the evidence of a child being loved and cared for carefully. "This is a malicious report," Patricia said before she left. "We see this sometimes with family disputes. I'm marking it unfounded. You shouldn't receive another contact unless there's a new report." "What if there is?" I asked. "Then we investigate again, and the pattern becomes evidence that the reports are retaliatory," she said. "For what it's worth, your daughter is thriving. You're doing a good job." The words hit me harder than I expected. That evening, I gathered everything, the emails, the messages, the CPS documentation, even a handwritten letter I'd found years ago in my mother's desk, dated from when I was a baby. "I'm not sure I bonded with this one," my mother had written. "She seems so independent already. Perhaps that's better." I scanned it all. I backed it up. And I sent it to my lawyer with a note. "If they file for visitation, I want them to see this." They never filed. Instead, my father sent a letter through his attorney offering a settlement, $5,000 to cover years of support you've provided Melissa in exchange for me not speaking about the family publicly. The implication was clear. Silence for money. I didn't respond. My mother called 3 more times over the next month. Each time, I let it go to voicemail. Each time, the message was essentially the same. They missed me, they wanted to make things right. Sophia was their granddaughter. Couldn't we please work this out? I changed my number. 6 months later, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a check for $15,000 and a letter from my father. The letter outlined that this was back payment for services rendered to the family over the years, and included an apology that read more like a legal document than something written by a person. It was signed by both my parents and had been notarized. I deposited the check and sent them a receipt. That money paid for Sophia's school to accelerate her education. It paid for her therapy, not because anything was wrong, but because I wanted her to have a safe space to process family relationships. It paid for us to take a trip to Colorado, just the 2 of us, where we hiked and ate ice cream and didn't think about anyone but ourselves. A year after the dinner, I ran into my mother at a grocery store in San Diego. I was back visiting an old friend. She looked smaller, older, uncertain. She saw me and Sophia and froze. I didn't acknowledge her. I just took Sophia's hand and we walked past her, past the familiar ache of trying to earn love from someone who decided long ago that I wasn't worth the effort. "Was that Grandma?" Sophia asked as we left the store. "Yes," I said. "Are we not going to talk to her?" "No, baby. We're not. Is that okay?" I thought about this carefully. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is protect ourselves from people who hurt us. Even if they're family. Especially if they're family. Sophia nodded like she understood, which she did. She'd always understood. She just needed permission to stop trying anyway. That evening, as I sat with Sophia watching the sunset from my hotel room, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just finally, completely at peace. My family had taught me that love was conditional and that my worth was measured by my usefulness. It had taken me 3 decades to unlearn that lesson, but I'd done it. And more importantly, I was making sure my daughter learned something different, that love is respect, that family is a choice, and that walking away from people who diminish you isn't betrayal. It's survival. I didn't regret the dinner. I regretted nothing about standing up in that moment and saying no. That one moment, saying understood with clarity and dignity, had changed everything. It had freed me from the weight of trying to be enough for people who'd decided before I was born that I never would be. If you've ever had to choose your peace over your family's comfort, if you've had to protect your children from people who should have loved them, if you've finally drawn a line and walked away, tell me where you're listening from. Share your story in the comments. And if this resonated well with you, subscribe. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing when to stop giving to people who will never give back. Sometimes freedom looks like a restaurant dinner where you finally stop performing and start living. That's what it looked like for me.